Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Villa Albertine with Paul Paradis, expert in the decorative arts and especially jewelry history with L'École, one of my dear friends and fellow teachers. I'm Inezita Gay-Eckel. I've been with the school since the very beginning, and I've been dedicated to jewelry history for quite a few years now. Love teaching at L'École, and we are so excited to be ensconced right on Central Park, and right there is the Met Museum, from which that generous, wonderful Met Museum, we've taken some superb images today to explore medieval jewels with you. Can't explore medieval jewels without the images of the jewels that we can find, because most of them have disappeared, and also paintings. We juxtapose jewels and paintings, jewels that still exist, jewelry always. I mean, the word for silver in French is money. So jewelry being money gets dispensed, it gets melted, it gets recycled, a big theme in discussing medieval jewelry. So we use paintings, and sometimes we even use jewelry to identify people in paintings. You know how before you go to a dinner at a nice restaurant, they bring you an amuse-bouche, something to whet your appetite, right, for the meal? Well, this is what we're doing here with this slide. On the left, we have a medieval jewel. And starting out right away, let's dispel any misconceptions about medieval jewelry. If we zoom in on what's called a white lady motif, which you find in a lot of aristocratic inventories from that era, I'd say it's anything but not sophisticated, wouldn't you? Take an enamel class at L'École with us and try your hand at enamel, every color baked at 800 degrees centigrade. Try to even think of making a sculpture out of enamel. That's called ronde bosse. Take a look at those beautiful leaves. Take a look at the way the pearls are placed. These medallions are part of an elegant medieval necklace. They would not have been connected with chains. They would have been sewn. They were part of the very elegant and codified way of dressing. And the jewels were so important that they'd be moved and sewn. Look to the right. Look at this portrait of a lovely young lady wearing something very similar. She's wearing medallions put together. They might have been sewn. They may have been connected. They might have been connected in an ephemeral way and moved, or this may have been a permanent necklace. It's hard to tell. But what's important for us is that the clues in her jewelry enabled her to finally be identified. She had sort of slept through a few hundred years before the Louvre art historians were able to determine, thanks to the B in her hair covering, and thanks to the C's and the M's and other aspects, the white roses and red roses, that she was Margaret of York. Margaret of York, who married Charles the Bold in one of the most lavish weddings of all history, because Charles the Bold of Burgundy, and Burgundy is not just snails, wonderful wine, and mustard. It was the richest place in the world. It straddled all the way into what's now the Netherlands and way into France. And Charles the Bold was at the summum and almost the end of that rich dukedom. So when Margaret of York came down from England and married him, he made it went on and on. It made an Indian wedding look poor. And this lady was also, she was an enlightened and philanthropic lady. You can see it almost in the way she's dressed. She's going to play a role in our discussion today, because our discussion today is to get into some truth about medieval jewelry. Chase away the clouds of darkness about the dark ages. Were they dark? Were the barbarians truly barbarian? Or were they simply barbar? The word was from the Greeks, who didn't understand foreign languages, and they would just say foreigners speak bar, 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 bar. So that meant that the Greeks didn't understand them and called them barbarians. So we're going to do 3 chapters, as usual. That's our tradition. We're a club, aren't we? We're a worldwide, around the planet club, and we know we do our 3 chapters. Our dear friend Gisela Ockerman, who is in charge of conferences, likes to keep us to the 3 chapters. He keeps us organized. He keeps us on the straight and narrow. He will be gathering your comments, your questions, and he will save preciously your questions until the end when we will answer them. And we will travel a jeweled bridge to start. First chapter. What do we mean by jeweled bridge? Literally, that is, to the medieval mind, in the medieval mindset, the medieval way of thinking. Say you're on the right bank in Paris. If you've been to Paris, the right bank, say where the Louvre is now. and that was built later, but say you were where that was, and you wanted to go over to the left bank. Perhaps you wanted to go to Ile de la Cité, and you wanted to visit Notre Dame. You would cross a bridge, one of the bridges, and you would walk over. For them, this life, the bodily, corporal life, and the hereafter, the after-death life, were as connected as that, literally by a bridge. In fact, save that thought, because Paul's going to show you a fun illustration of exactly concretizing that. So jewels could show the messages about heaven and give the messages about all we care about on earth.
Should we do some
Second
cooking?
chapter, we're going to do
Cuisine by a goldsmith, the entremet and feasting culture. It's a very interesting phenomenon. In French, the entremet is something that you eat in between courses, but in the Middle Ages, it took on a whole new meaning. And we're going to look at what that meant for goldsmithing, for entertainment.
And then third chapter.
Form and function. We have to realize that in the Middle Ages, jewels, yes, they represented power. We're going to see that, and prestige, but they were functional. Belts, a mounière, the little purse that people use, mostly brooches to hold your clothing. We're going to understand all of these different functions, whether it be power, spirituality, or love.
So without further ado, let's cross that jeweled bridge into the world of the Middle Ages, and let's look at what were these Middle Ages in the face of one of the most important works of art in history, 1432, the Middle Ages. Glittering and bright and light is what it was. This is a masterpiece by Hubert and Jan van Eyck. Hubert died during the making of the painting. Jan finished it. Jan was never not famous and never not wealthy. In fact, he was even ennobled by his boss, Philip the Good. Philip the Good, the father of Charles of old, ennobled him and kept raising his salary because everyone was so smitten by his talents. The Italians, now they don't usually give credit away. The Italians gave him credit for inventing oil painting. Vasari, in his life, said that Jan van Eyck invented oil. He didn't. He just perfected it. Just lets you know. This painting has been the most vandalized in history. It's had pieces stolen. The Germans took it twice, World War I and World War II. If you saw the Monument movie, George Clooney is involved in saving it. It's just, it weaves its way all through the history of the world. For us, it's about the jewelry. The jewelry and what did the jewelry mean? And even what was the jewelry of the Middle Ages. We're going to get back to God the Father there. Jesus Christ who sort of becomes God the Father. We, in other courses, in our course, and we discuss Mary, John the Baptist, of course, even he's wearing jewelry, which doesn't make much sense, but jewelry needs to be everywhere. We're going to travel. We can't do it all today. It's too tempting. I'm going to zoom that back out, and we're going to go to just one detail. One tiny little part, which is this wild chorus of angels singing hymns. In this chorus group of angels singing hymns, first of all, let's look at all these diadems. Do we have any doubt now that there was a tremendous amount of fashion in the jewels, that there was a tremendous amount of detail and different styles of jewels? Because let's take it for granted, if you will trust us, we can prove it. The jewels that you see in these paintings reflected real jewels in real life, even though these are jewels being worn in heaven. That's what we mean about the bridge. All of this is so real. The hair, you feel like you could practically touch the hair. But let's look at these singing angels. They look like young children singing in a choir, don't they? The guy in the back, it looks like he's very upset, maybe because he got the back row. He's not in the front, maybe because his parents can't see him. These two are concentrating away. They're happy they have the front row. This one looks like she or he is having real trouble hitting the notes.
They're concentrating.
Yes, and as you've told me, Paul, some people claim they can even know what music they're singing.
Yes, musicologists claim that the positioning of their mouths can tell you the note. I'm a little skeptical. I'm a trained musician myself, but it just goes to show you how much people, the level of detail that Jan van Eyck was able. In fact, that musical score and the actual instrument that Santa Teresa, the other saint, is playing, Saint Cecile on the other side, they reproduce those, and they are real.
Wow. So let's just look, narrowing in. This is all going to be a story of narrowing in during this hour. Let's look at one jewel. Let's focus in at one jewel that one of the angels is wearing. Wow. And that one jewel, if we focus in on one pearl, if you look at that pearl, you know why I'm in front of you here today. Literally, it starts with that pearl. I was headed for law school at Princeton. I didn't want anything to do with art. I studied art to be with my girlfriend Fabrizia. I just took the course. And then I went head over heels in love with the way Jan van Eyck was depicting pearls in particular. And I thought, why did he care so much? Look at this. And when our gemologist, Lily von Wattenaket, looked at this yesterday, she said, I can grade the pearl from the painting. And you can see where the light's coming from. The light, exactly, in San Bavo's cathedral, in the small chapel of the Yid family that they had commissioned. You can see where the light is hitting the sapphire. She said she could see the light hitting the sapphire, she could see the light refracting, she could see it coming back out. The emeralds, the same thing, you could see how they were cut. Why was this so interesting? The flowers, the way they're set. Why was this so interesting to Jan van Eyck? And why is this such evidence? This is evidence of the kind of jewelry there was. It was interesting because to them, this is a direct analogy. Goldsmiths were paid more. If we look at the detail of the goldsmith, goldsmiths were paid more than painters, architects, or sculptors because goldsmiths touched gold, and gold was close to God. So if we look at pure goldsmithery, so the two jewels on the two angels, pure goldsmithery, all the things we discuss in our gold talks, filigrane, granite sculpture, probably lost wax casting.
Casting, exactly.
Yeah, this little angelic figure with the writing of the book, the movement of the muscles and bones beneath the drapery. We can read all that, which means that Jan was studying a really fantastic piece of gold work when he was doing this work. That gets us going into discussing evidence, because we asked you to trust us that the jewels in the Jan van Eyck paintings were somewhat based on actual jewels that Jan van Eyck saw. Take it away, Paul.
Well, we'd like to talk, we're talking about windows today and connections. And what we thought was interesting about this slide, if you look at God the Father, Jesus represented as God the Father, he's wearing this papal tiara with 3 levels. And Jan van Eyck obviously knew this tiara. They had been wearing them since the 14th century. They call that the triregnum. It's the 3 reigns of Jesus. He's actually representing the King of Kings. He's actually the regent of the world, and he's vicar of Christ. So this idea that we see in the Van Eyck painting, completely detailed. And on the left, there's this Pope's tomb. It's in Avignon, France. He was a Pope in the 14th century. And if you look carefully at his actual tiara, it's precisely the same design, even some of the same motifs. You have those trifoil leaves. You have some cabochon-looking gems, all represented the 3 levels of the power and the reign of Jesus representing God.
I'm going to hazard that those are pearls.
Probably.
Those interstitial things.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
They're probably pearls. But what's interesting here is if we look at history, these actual papal crowns, the way that history turned out, and we selected the one on the right that was made in the 1804. Why? Because these crowns, Napoleon Bonaparte was in Italy, of course, during the wars leading up to his becoming the emperor. And they actually, in the Treaty of Tolentino, the popes had to give all as war reparations and war booty, all of the stones and the beautiful things that they owned. And the Napoleonic forces, they destroyed the papal tiaras. So we really have to realize that those tiaras, in fact, I read a story
the cardboard crown.
Yeah, I think it was Pius VI who wore a cardboard tiara. So what Napoleon does is, in preparing his coronation, he wants to invite the Pope, Pope Pius, to come and preside over his coronation. He sends him this gift made by Nitou, Marie-Etienne Nitou, who is one of the official jewelers of Napoleon and who would later, of course, become Chaumet generations later. He creates this beautiful crown with the 3 levels, this ginormous emerald on the top, 414 carats, which all belonged to the Pope originally. So Napoleon has this beautiful piece made, and he gives it to the Pope in preparation. The only problem was he made it too small intentionally. The Pope couldn't possibly wear it, and it weighs 8 kilos. So it was sort of an empoisoned gift, but it was a political gesture, and Napoleon, so you see in David's painting, Napoleon, the Pope is holding it on his lap. He's not wearing it. But it's very important because to see that this window to the past, and they perhaps even used the Van Eyck crown for this creation, who knows?
I think that if we look at our friend on the left, and we look how very carefully close it is to the one on the right, and then we look at the one by Jan van Eyck, it's for sure. we're for sure that Jan van
It's the
Eyck
same design.
had seen the Pope's crown, or he'd seen at least paintings of the Pope's crown. He meant it. And he meant it very specifically because, let's start, since we're saying that, let's look at the crown on the right. Let's start a different way today. And the crown on the right is at the feet of that same guy, Jesus, who becomes God, who looks like the Pope, who looks like the Pope with all the jewels on planet Earth, the Pope zillionaire. So at his feet is that crown on the right. Let's look at that crown. And let's save the thought that we don't see the one in the middle. All right, let's look at it. It defies gravity. It has so much open work. We define high jewelry today by that open work, the ability to have something seem to float without structure. It defies gravity. It's got these giant red spinels. It's got sapphires. It's got everything. Maybe it's a confection. It's definitely the symbol of earthly power. So on the God's head is the Pope type crown, and at his feet is an earthly power type crown. The power of the earth is at his feet. Well, but maybe Jan van Eyck just painted that. Maybe he just enjoyed going on a spree of imagination. Maybe not. Thanks to the fact that Henry IV of England, having just dispatched his predecessor not so well, not so nicely, grabbed all his goods, and we had a double inventory, the end of the 1300s, and then a few years later, Henry IV does a new inventory of the goods, and we know that this crown was in the royal inventory before the end of the 1300s, very important, and then we know it was sent with his little daughter, Blanche, 9 years old, who was married off to the fabulously wealthy Louis of Bavaria. We know that it stayed in the residence palace, now the Schatzkammer of the Residence Palace Museum, ever since. We know that this crown was made in the 1300s. And we know the crown, we can visit it. We can see all of this. We can see the spinels, the rubies. We can see the scroll work. We can see the leaves. We can see filigree. We can see the fact that it is as tall as it is wide, just like Sainte-Chapelle in Paris, the incredible chapel that just soars up in the air and is all open with light and color. This is the jewelry equivalent of that. This is Gothic architecture in a jewel. It exists, it's real, it's made of all the most precious things on earth. So, if we then look to the left, and we look at this Madonna in the cathedral by Jan van Eyck. You notice how the Madonna is way too big for the cathedral. It's as if the cathedral was a dollhouse. And she's this giant doll inside the dollhouse. She's supposed to be like that because the idea is that even though the cathedral, look at even now, cathedrals stick up all over Europe. You can find your way from many, many, many miles, even in an airplane, by looking at all the cathedrals. My husband always says, boy, people in the Middle Ages really like God because they built these giant cathedrals everywhere. It's unbelievable with wheelbarrows and stones. So even that, the idea is that she's so monumental that she dominates the cathedral. And what does she have on her head with the baby sort of playing with her dress, the baby Jesus? She has a crown that looks almost like Princess Blanche's. Fact is, Jan van Eyck was a diplomat. He traveled all over Europe for Philip the Good. He saw everything. So he was painting real jewels. I hope everyone's convinced.
We have more proof.
Surprise, yes.
We have a story for you of this very wealthy man, Chancellor Roland. He worked for Philip the Good, one of the Dukes of Burgundy, for 40 years. He amassed a huge fortune. He acquired land, of course, vineyards, because we're in the region of Burgundy. And just to make sure to set his soul at peace, he commissioned this painting from our Van Eyck for his personal chapel. Now, what we see here is Roland on the left, obviously very wealthy with this beautiful velvet fabric. And he depicts himself with the Virgin, the Queen of Heaven. Literally, he was proud enough to do that. And she is depicted as her holy self and her red, of course. But let's look behind them. We're talking about bridges. On the left behind Roland, you see his wealth. You see his vineyards. You see his Burgundy, what made him wealthy. And then the bridge takes you to a spiritual realm of the Blessed Mother. And you see cathedrals. You see beautiful places. And she is being crowned. So it's clear he is really wants her blessing, and he's lucky because she's holding the baby Jesus on her lap. and Jesus is blessing him. And the reason why we love this piece, there's so much symbolism in this painting, we could just do one lecture on it. But what's interesting is this baby Jesus is holding a very precious object. He's holding in his hand a globe made of rock crystal, which was considered the mother of all stones, its purity. And he has, showing that he's king of the earth, really. And you have this beautiful gem set cross, showing, we believe, real, or let's say, gold craftsmanship. And the use of the blue stones, the heavenly blue of the sapphire, the red, of course, reflecting Mary's maternal role, and also perhaps Jesus' future sacrifice. So all of this in this beautiful object that Jesus is holding. But do we think that this really existed? Did things like this really exist?
Once again, once again, Paul, we might be tempted to think, well, it's Jesus Christ holding this precious object in his hands. Maybe this is another confection. Maybe this was just imagined.
Jan van Eyck's imagination.
Well, thanks to the fact that Henry V of England wanted to mess up France with the 100 Years' War, to make a long story very short, and wanted particularly to make a particular trip where the Battle of Agincourt was going to happen, and his archers were going to massacre the flower of French nobility. And at the end of the Battle of Agincourt, he came back and the King of France had to actually give Catherine of Valois in marriage to him. In order to take that trip, he'd gone to the Lord Mayor of London. London was a very, very rich city. And he said, I need a very big loan. I need the equivalent of many, many millions of dollars, many, many millions of pounds to go over to France. London gave him the money, and now it's a loan. When he comes back from France with his new French bride, he also brings this scepter. And thanks to the fact that he brought this scepter, which he said he'd ordered for them while he took it, he brought it back and he gave it to the Lord Mayor of London. The Lord Mayor of London somehow managed to keep it intact through all the vicissitudes of history. It's still there. It has only recently been published. I found it in a Till Holger Borchert book about Jan van Eyck. And there you see the ballet rubies, the spinels, the sapphires, the pearls, beyond price pearls, the fleur-de-lis. How could it be an English scepter? The swirling gold, all the goldsmithery.
The fluted rock crystal I find so beautiful.
Oh, the perfectly matched pearls. And the fluted rock crystal where you have to engrave into the rock crystal to put those spirals of gold. All of that is evidence. No, it's not the globe with the cross on top of it, but it's so close. I think we all agree. And if we go back side by side and we look, it's pretty clear. Once again, if art historians are really the lawyers of history, we have to prove everything way beyond a reasonable doubt, especially since our jury is other art historians who are very, very particular. In this case, we think we could rest our case. We're talking about pearls.
Let's have a cocktail.
Aren't pearls the essential ingredient in medieval jewels?
Yes. Pearls, we like to talk about pearls. These pearls are actually from what we call a bestiary. These are these texts that were written to talk about, explain the natural world. Because everything on the earth is a manifestation of the divine. So in medieval times, they based their bestiaries on actually Greek examples, explaining pearls, explaining animals, explaining how stones might even, in also other books about lapidaries, how stones are living things and they might multiply. So here, the pearl has always been considered divine because of its color, because of its purity. And here, in two bestiaries, one from northern France and one from England, we have a citation to read to you, a quotation of how pearls are made. At dawn, the oyster opens and takes in the rays of the stars, the moon and the sun, and also swallows dew, and from these come the pearl. So they thought it was the mist. The oysters would come to the surface and get dew and moonlight and go back down and create these beautiful gems. And look at what we're seeing. We have, of course, Mary. We have to add Mary in. She's the one who makes it all pure and beautiful and holy. So Mary we can think of as our bartender, like you said, celestial bartender who's adding that extra additive to make the pearls. Pearls were considered the most rich and the most valued of gems since antiquity. So it's very important in all of these pieces that we're talking about, the role of the pearl as a beautiful gem and its symbolism, which is quite clear.
It's rare to find. We search and search and search to find beautiful examples because mostly these jewels disappeared. But thanks to places like the Met, thanks to people like J.P. Morgan, in fact, we have examples. On the left, there's only one pearl in the piece. And sometimes Paul has to remind me to speak about the pearl because I get so worked up about the garnets and the beautiful frameworks of gold that are made to set those little way like paper thin, finely shaved pieces of garnet into those exquisite patterns, making this eagle. This eagle is Merovingian. It's from 500 to 600, the Dark Ages. It was worn by an extremely elegant and sophisticated lady in those dark ages.
Their tunics.
Merovingian, yes. And it's definitely a styling and even a savoir-faire that had come from the far eastern Eurasians with these new people who had migrated into Europe. They brought fresh blood, they brought fresh ways of thinking, they brought fresh ways of being. And women were extremely powerful among that group. It was a different kind of and it really led us toward the modern humans. And I think that if we look at that piece, we in a way can see all of that, and we also might think that Daniel Brush might have made it yesterday. The eye is a pearl. So they saved the pearl for the most important thing. This is the eagle. It's the symbol of Merovingian culture, and the eye is the pearl. What's interesting is there's a second one, which you can visit, that J.P. Morgan kept. So he gave one to the Met. He kept one that's in the Morgan Library. That one is missing its pearl. So he knew the pearl was so important. He gave the one with the pearl to the Met and kept the other. On the right, we all know about, it's a really fun invention, Happy Diamonds by Chopard, which was in the 80s and 90s. It was all the thing. Well, to me, this is Happy Pearls. It's Happy Pearls that are extremely important because the pearls are underneath a dome of that rock crystal. They are all very round, beyond price. Remember, they think Virgin Mary and the dew and the sun and the moon make them. And then that's one piece, right and left. On the left is the bottom of the piece. The piece is what's known as a reliquary. A reliquary, again, we have to travel that bridge back in time. A reliquary was the connection of the earthly and the heavenly. And the closer you were to it, the better off you were, because the relics were actually, suspend our modern consciousness, bits and pieces of dead saints.
Exactly.
And those are those little bits and pieces you see in there, on the little compartments going around the cross. And that meant that if you wore that, if you kept that close to you, you had that heavenly protection that was there with you. So the relic plays a key role in the Middle Ages. But when we look at medieval jewelry, we think it's a more key role than it was. Jewelry was everywhere. If you could have it, you wore it for many different reasons. The relics tended to be preserved. They were preserved in the vaults of churches, so we see more relics. And that's why we wanted to put a relic next to an absolutely fashion jewel that was all about a sophisticated lady, and it was about the eagle as the perception and that sort of new way of having power. And that's a good way to jump into this idea that jewels were everywhere and expressed all kinds of things, and every kind of different person had them. It's just that they don't always make their way through time to us.
Yes, we wanted to talk about a royal testament and a testament of love. All of these different roles for jewels, it's not new. On the left, remember Margaret of York, this lady who became Duchess of Burgundy? She wore this coronet. Let's call it a coronet because it's quite small. It's only about 5 centimeters. 12 centimeters and 5 inches, but she wore this crown for that glorious wedding that Inezita talked about. There was a procession in Bruges, and she shocked the public because she didn't sit protected in her carriage. She waved to all the burghers, and everybody loved her.
She became very loved.
She became very loved, and she's wearing this precious item, which is made with silver gilt. Look at those flowers. All of those stones and colors have meaning. The white rose, perhaps York. She's from the family of York. The beautiful white rose, and also the use of that Baroque pearl right at the center of the piece. So it shows the value that they placed on that pearl, almost like the regent in the French Louis XV crown. There's a cross with diamonds.
And yes, those are diamonds.
It looks like they're bluish. I don't know.
No, they're diamonds. It's
they're
just the way it's
diamonds,
photographed.
And
these are diamonds here,
you have
too.
different levels of flowers. You have flowers that are black and white. You have flowers and blue and white. All of these colors are from the heraldry, joining the family of York with her beloved Burgundy. And in the middle is really fun. You have the C, you have the Charles, and look at the C and the M. In the midsection next to the big pearl, a little lower, yes. Those are actually their initials joined by a love knot. So if it wasn't clear, yes, it's a royal.
There, right here.
Yes, it's a royal jewel. It's sumptuous in its use of pearls and colored stones. You have you have also that huge. It's probably a spinel at the top. So this precious piece, which people mistakenly sometimes think, or maybe they're correct, where the jury's still out. It's so small that it was a votive crown, but no, she wore it. We've seen in paintings from that period, ladies wore them high on their head. And on the right, we have a very moving testament. It was discovered in Erfurt in the 1990s. It's a treasure that was hidden by a Jewish family during the pogroms, during the Black Plague in the 14th century. They were persecuted for causing the plague. It was, of course, ridiculous. But they hid their jewels and lots of gold. And this was found in the wall of someone's home, and it's clearly a sentimental jewel. Let's look at the shape. It's a bow and arrow. So remember Cupid, those of you who've seen our sentimental jewel discussion. Cupid shooting you with the arrow. You have a pearl for purity, perhaps the purity of the love. You have a red stone, perhaps a spinel, passion. And you have a beautiful engraved message, "O means Herz," which means "Oh, my heart." So we're pretty sure this is from the 14th century sentimental jewel. So we go from royal to personal to sentimental.
And it shows you that the jewels, when you can find them, I mean, in that case, the jewels had to be buried underneath a synagogue and protected for hundreds and hundreds of years, and only found a couple of years ago for us to know the true story of what jewels could look like. Cuisine by goldsmith. What on earth do we mean by this? We mean that goldsmiths literally prepared for their bosses fantastic pieces of goldsmithery for parties. Let's just focus in on the goldsmithery for a second before we go to this crazy party. If we zoom in just on this table, everything on this table had a specific function, a kind of an etiquette, a specific reason it was used, sometimes even an actual servant who would be specialist in that, wine or sauce or something that would serve, or little sweetmeats and spiced candies that would serve them. And it could be pure gold or very, very heavy gilt silver. Silver is very, very valuable. Remember, the French word for money is argent, is silver. This was part of the ceremony of an extremely sophisticated cultural center of life. The center of life, political, cultural, social, were these banquets, these parties that would go on and on and on, that would involve theater, that would involve cuisine, that would involve the intermarriage of theater and cuisine in the embodiment of the entremet. Today, we know the entremet as something that is served in between courses. Well, in between the courses, you'd be served things on those beautiful plates, but you also would have entertainment. Now, that was usually actors, professional actors, gymnasts, musicians who would do all kinds of crazy things, a bunch of humans inside a horse that would come marching and dancing, all kinds of wild stuff. In this particular case, this is one that comes down through history for hundreds of years as the Burning Man event, right, Paul?
Yes, it's actually a sad event, but it was remembered forever. It was in 1393, and King Charles VI of France had bouts of depression, so they wanted to cheer him up. So they organized a party, a beautiful banquet, and some nobility, cousins of his, and he himself actually, they put on these crazy costumes. It was a tight bodysuit, and they wanted to look like wild men, so they covered it with resin and other linseed oil, if you can imagine, so they could stick feathers and fur. Unfortunately, somebody came too close with the flame, and they all caught on fire. And it was a sad story because most of them perished, except for the one on the right who jumps into a barrel of wine, and the king. The king himself went to hide in one of his relatives, his aunt or cousin's dresses, and he saved himself. So this is always forever known as le bal des ardents, the burning men. But it's important because it shows, as Inezita was saying, the importance of the entertainment aspect. In fact, in the cookbooks of the time, the viandier, they would tell you how to do this. Oh, you paint a tablecloth to look like the sea, and you put people under it, and you put a fake dragon on top. It was very much part of it was literally a transition between food and not.
And it was essential to the political and social life. We thought that we really needed to show that, and that makes a lot more sense when you look at something that you might have on your mouse pad. You might have bought Christmas cards or postcards of our next slide, which, yes. I thought I turned it and I hadn't, sorry. The Duc de Berry and his Très riche heure de Duc de Berry by the Limbourg brothers. You've come across it for sure. Someone sent you this on a Christmas card or something. These are books of hours. What are these books of hours? First of all, the reason why these books of hours, if you go to the Morgan Library and you see them, and they're kept in the dark, even as you approach them, they're literally jewelry on pages. The gold, pure gold, slaps you in the eye, you know, as you walk into the room, because it's pure gold. The blue was priceless. It was lapis lazuli, which was a very expensive gem coming all the way from Afghanistan that's ground into powder to make the robes. These were to entertain the ultra-rich during the many, 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 many hours, sometimes often fasting, that you had to spend in church for long liturgical ceremonies. Here we have this, the man who ordered this book, and the book is one of the greatest in all history, and he was one of the richest people in all history. You could kind of tell how rich he was, first of all, by the blue, the fur. The blue was it wasn't color like there is now. Color belonged to the rich, and blue especially. The big gold collar that could be any dignified rapper of today. The fur hat, because it's January, and the fact that he's chubby. It's easy to be chubby nowadays, isn't it? We all have that problem. But in those days, being chubby was rare. Even if you were an aristocrat, you were off fighting wars, you were marching, you had trouble even keeping weight on. You were sick a lot of the time. You see how everybody wants to get to this chubby man. The priest is super interested in getting to him. All the followers are super interested in getting to him. All the social, except some people who are busy downing the wine over there on the other table of gold. See that? Yes. And the soldiers are outside just in case anyone wants to make any trouble. And I like this guy. This guy is that guy. Like when you see, especially when Donald Trump was in office, there was that guy looking out for him that nobody didn't attack him. The Duc de Berry was so rich that he had 17 chateaus. 17. They're all gone. When he passed away, he was the king's brother, and he was seen to be the richest man in Europe, not so much for the 17 chateaus, but because he had 50 cameos and intaglios. Stay tuned for our cameo and intaglio exhibition, the Ladriere collection. What we care about right now, because we're talking about these dinners, these ceremonies, is right here. Yes, the dogs and those funny little dead animals, but the dogs that are looking right at these two objects. This thing that looks like a ship is called a nef, and it's often mistranslated when it goes to English. Nef is really the word. It looks like a ship, and it's the container for the royal or rich person's cutlery and plates and spoons. Well, there wasn't any forks. There was knives, and you ate almost everything with your fingers and a spoon. Look at that, and that was very special to him because it would protect him from poison, for one thing. It could be guarded and watched over. And then look straight ahead from the two small dogs at the little small gold object that's to the right of it. Let's go to the next slide.
Yes, what that is, it's in the shape of a nef, like we talked about, this idea of the boat in front of the man of honor of the table. This piece is extremely rare because these pieces were often melted. They went to be melted and turned into something else after the feast. And this is a salt cellar. Now, the nef did have salt in it, the larger one. They could have many different things. This is a very precious salt cellar carved of crystal, rock crystal. We spoke about how important rock crystal is and its symbolism. Salt at the time was extremely luxurious, very costly. It was actually the divine. It was God's presence at the table. It also was a necessity. People were exerting themselves quite a bit in those days, fighting wars and working in fields, and so salt was a luxury product, but very necessary. And this piece from the 13th century at the Metropolitan is very beautiful, showing us the luxury of these items. This salt cellar in gold, with it's set with rubies, with emeralds, with pearls, and even the little opening, the pull. It looks like it's like a little snake or a.
I think it's a stem of a flower.
It's a stem of a flower. Yeah,
it could be cast.
You're right.
Probably.
It's probably cast. Yeah. So these objects, they do come to us every so often, and we do have a window of the past. Unfortunately, we don't have the huge nef that belonged to the Duc de Berry, but we have a very similar object, and it gives us a feeling of the luxury of the time.
Those went into the pot even after he had a giant inventory when he passed away. Thank heavens. These inventories are extremely important to us because we study them and we try to figure out which piece is which.
Exactly.
However, it can be very confusing because during this era, for example, bague, the word French for ring, could be anything. And in England, same thing. Ring could be anything. It could be what we just looked at. It could be some of these things. It could be a necklace, it could be a bracelet, it just meant a precious thing. And the goldsmith was a jeweler, he was an interior decorator, he was the person who would organize events and feasts, he would sometimes even be involved in designing the events. And that's why we wanted to have you join us here at a dinner, which is allegedly Alexander the Great having dinner, but it's actually a perfect contemporary social history of dinner at the Duke of Burgundy's house.
They don't look very Greek.
Right, so the Duke of Burgundy's house, one of these could be Margaret. Margaret and her friends. You can see the exquisite jewels and the unbelievably elaborate headdresses. The men also are decked out. They have gold everywhere. They wear jewelry. They are eating a very elaborate and expensive feast, although you see, it looks almost like it's a Japanese restaurant. It's very simple because those
little
serving items, right, would be brought and taken away, and then someone would come and help you wash your hands for the next course. Everyone's probably thinking, first of all, you're watching the dogs. The dogs are always the entertainment. They're busy everywhere. One of the reasons why you liked having the dogs around is because if they eat something and they keel over, you know that someone tried to poison you before you get poisoned. But also, are they eating live pheasants? Paul, are they eating live pheasants?
No, actually, in these viandiers, these books, these cookbooks that we talk about, they would describe how to redress the bird, the cooked
Peacocks,
bird,
I mean.
peacock, to look, whether it be a pheasant or a peacock. They would put the feathers back on so it looked like a real bird. And it was the peacock, of course, they thought it was a source of immortality because they thought that the peacock flesh doesn't rot. So it is a very the presentation was just as important as the actual food. You had food with gold on it. They would tell them to put gold leaf all over it. We have another salt cellar, extremely rare. This is one of the few that we know of. It would belong to Louis XIV, of course, later in the 1680s. He collected these mounted gems, he liked to call them. It has an agate cup, and look at the base of it. The base is actually, it's medieval goldsmithing, and it's the original goldsmithing from the 15th century, looking like the architecture of the time. You can see those arcs, those little towers. There were gargoyles, a few that are still remaining. You see that polyhedric form with the beautiful filigree. And you can see the initials, which are still yet to be discovered, who they were, who they represent, SE and enamel. You even have those little children that are in ronde de Beauce enamel, and the sumptuousness of it's very small. It's really beautiful. In the Louvre, if you go see, those of you who are able to, it's quite beautiful. And again, it was a salt cellar. And so there's only one or two others that we know of. I think one's in the Victoria and Albert.
Because the vast majority...
Louis XIV had a real eye for beautiful things.
And yet even Louis XIV could only have one from the 1400s.
Exactly.
And by the way, that stone piece is probably from antiquity.
Exactly.
That idea of keeping something from antiquity and bringing it forward in time was the quintessential expression of sophistication, as in this, which the word for it, aqua manile, aqua water, manile for the hands. This was for hand washing. So one person would be delegated to bring these elegant conversation pieces around the table in between courses. Imagine our friends in Burgundy seated around that table with all their jewels. And your hands would be washed with some kind of flowery, perhaps rose water, lemon water, and maybe even different flavors of flowered water between each course, appropriate to the course. And this aqua manile would be a conversation piece. You're probably thinking, that's quite a conversation piece, isn't it?
Yes.
And the reason why I said bringing antiquity forward, because the story, again, between quotation marks, is Aristotle and Phyllis. This is a story that if you try to trace it back, you find that it really blossomed in the Middle Ages. Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher, teacher of Alexander the Great. Teaching Alexander the great conqueror of half the world before he died so young, that he should not fall victim to the follies of the flesh. Well, that didn't work out so well, because Alexander the Great actually died after a marathon party. But anyway, Phyllis was someone that Aristotle allowed to dominate him and make a fool of him and ride him around like a donkey, you could say, to show Alexander how silly and how weak it was to allow yourself to fall to the sins of the flesh.
And let's not take care of the affairs of state.
Right, but let's say this was having fun too. There's definitely, yes, it looks like Phyllis is grabbing Aristotle and steering him by his hair. The water to wash your hands is in a comically placed spigot underneath Aristotle's beard. Phyllis looks very imperious and very dominating, shall we say. But let's, from our metalworking point of view, it's not gold, but thank heavens, because it made it through time to the Metropolitan Museum for these beautiful high-def photos, and we can see the belt. We can see, we're going to talk about buckling the buckle.
They were quite high, didn't they?
Yes.
It's beautiful.
And we can, absolutely. And we can see, well, let's not comment on that.
No.
But we can
the
see.
placement of the hand,
yes,
I think we should leave.
But we can see the water going into the top of her head. So there's where the water went. We can see the way her hair is rendered. It's exquisite. That's really ciselé, isn't it? Scissor cut. Look at those sleeves. Could it be more elegant, those sleeves? So very interesting. And also her position, the ladies of the era were very competent, expert horsewomen, and they rode side saddle. And her position, I'm based in equitation. I was on a horse before I could walk, and that's perfect equitation position. So these were ladies and gentlemen side by side at dinners, giggling and whispering, and that's the kind of conversation that went on.
And this piece is not in gold, which is probably why it survived.
Exactly.
Right?
We're lucky. That's what I just said.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
So
As I was just saying, but thank you for putting emphasis on it. You're absolutely right.
Welcome.
And once again, there were others for sure that were in silver and gold. That's why we love when we can have something like that that makes it through time.
This is actually one of the most spectacular entremets that we discovered. Inezita found in the Cleveland Museum, and we thank them for allowing us to use these beautiful images. This is actually a fountain which would have rose water or some kind of fragrant waters in it. It's made of gilt metal, and it has enamel plaques, and it has lots of wheels. It has, you can see the Gothic architecture, 3 levels. It's around this high, and it actually represents the architecture of the time. You have the grotesques and those beautiful enamel plaques. They're lapping up the water. And it also has architectural detail. It has cast items. It has chased items, turrets, towers.
You can even see the stone here.
Exactly, the stones which are cut out. But what's interesting is, yes, those are bells. It has bells and wheels, because this piece, they had the plumbing knowledge, the engineering knowledge to make this piece function. And we have a video so that you can actually see how it works.
And here, this is thanks to AI, artificial intelligence. It's thanks to the Getty Museum, and it's thanks to the Cleveland Museum. It shows you exactly how the bubbling of the water, the sound of the bells, the whole thing would entertain you with a lovely perfume emanating around the room. And that would be in the center, as the servant was passing around with Aristotle and Phyllis to wash your hands, and as other servants were coming around with exquisite sweetmeats, kind of spicy, different kinds of cardamom and cinnamon and all that sort of thing to whet your appetite in between courses. Of course, the pheasant that's covered with the feathers that was really cooked. All of that would be happening in these lovely, elegant evenings, these sophisticated evenings. Our final discussion, our final chapter, is something we've been really doing all along, which is talking about the form and function. You crossed the jewel bridge to heaven. You had a social and political event that was studied and actually marked and communicated by the jeweled items. The form and function of jewels, we like to use a phrase that the French like, which is boucler la boucle, to buckle the buckle, to make the circle complete. Because whether it was relics, yes, they are at the heart of European medieval belief, or whether it was other jewels we're going to look at right now. Relics. When we talk about relics, it's really good to think about some relics which changed the history. You could say they changed the history of Europe, because these relics caused England to become French. It caused William the Conqueror from Normandy to be able to take over England and to completely change history. Yes, indeed. If we focus in on this, which is the Bayeux Tapestry, if we focus in on the Bayeux Tapestry, we see on the far right, we see Harold, who is now the King of England. Do you see him over there with a kind of chagrin? His mouth is downturned. He looks very unhappy. He has his hand touching something. It's a table. It's an altar. And then on the left is William the Conqueror. He's raised up on a throne. He's very elegant and royal. And you've got 2 birds to direct your eyes to the very important middle part, which is the place where Harold is being forced to swear an oath. See Sacramentum? Harold, who's the King of England, is being forced by William the Conqueror to swear an oath that Harold's going to be okay with William taking over England. Harold's not too happy about that. He's the king of England. So Harold is under duress. He swears that it's okay. But Harold sort of has his fingers crossed behind his back because he's saying, I'm under threat of death. So in European chivalric law, whatever, I won't say chivalric, but in the custom, if you make an oath under duress, it's not a real oath. However, kind of like the magician, this tapestry is covering relics, sacred relics. We talked about that. They could be relics like this, bits and pieces of saints. That means that poor Harold swore a good oath. Legally, it's a good oath. And poor Harold ultimately gets shot in the eye with an arrow and loses England.
And yes, because of the power of the relics, you had the war. You had the takeover. So these are some beautiful...
We don't have those relics, but we have something similar.
No, these are quite beautiful. This is actually a German princess named Gertrude, and she commissioned these. She was a princess in Brunswick in Saxony, and she commissioned these for her husband and herself. They're crosses which they would use for personal devotion. There's gold filigree, there's gold, there's all types of repoussé, and look at the beauty of the stones. There's a beautiful sapphire or chrysoprase. There's some beautiful rock crystal, and you see you have the images of the apostles, the lion for Luke, etc.
Everything.
And these crosses were inscribed in the back. You could place relics, and she actually inscribed her name. This is a gift from Gertrude to this saint and that saint. And in the middle is a beautiful altar. We call that a little portable altar, and it was made to show her devotion to Christ. In fact, she used porphyry, which was one of the most imperial stones, the stone on the top, which is a beautiful sort of purplish red with specks. It's really because she was trying to show that she too was part of the Holy Roman Empire, and she puts all of those beautiful saints and apostles on the sides to show that she also is a lady with ambition, but also in front of God. So these are the types of beautiful pieces that Gertrude, in this case, this is the Guelph treasure, which actually came to the US right after the stock market crash, and the American magnates were able to acquire these, and which is why it's in the Cleveland Museum.
And the date, 1038, is not that far off from, and that's why we thought it was fun to show it to you. Now, on the right, recently some historians have published that this might be the Holy Grail embellished with some Spanish jewels, correct?
Yes. On the right there was a king in Leon, it's a northern part of Spain, and he was Fernando, he was very astute at fighting the Moors. This was, of course, the Moorish, when they lived for 700 years in the Iberian Peninsula. But in any case, he was a very powerful king, and he gave a lot of land to his daughter, Urraca, and she made this chalice. She gave her personal stones and riches to make this chalice. And the chalice, it has, of course, some ancient agate from antiquity, but she used her personal stones and jewels with this beautiful gold work. You can even see it's sort of like let's say a fake cameo made out of glass paste. So she's trying to show, of course, links to the Roman Empire. But look at the beautiful gold work. And this chalice actually was interesting because a few years ago, some scholars claimed that it could be the Holy Grail, the chalice from which Christ himself drank at the Last Supper. It caused quite a ruckus, didn't it? Everybody went to this basilica in Lyon,
so talking about
Sant Isidro in Lyon.
Oh yes, they had to build special facilities.
And we see it in this beautiful illumination these are the miracles of Saint Louis. Saint Louis, of course, the king of France in the 13th century, who was canonized because of his miraculous life. And here he is before leaving on the Crusades, and he's baptizing someone in a baptismal basin, which looks like a chalice with beautiful stones, gold, and all around this beautiful illuminated manuscript, you have gems and jewels that are set in real gold. They use gold leaf for these beautiful. So again, the jewels and the gems are also everyone on the right-hand side, the crowns, the richness of this. These colors, which we can actually still, it's hard to imagine how the wealth for this type of piece. So we wanted to show you a real chalice and a chalice in this illuminated manuscript.
And here we have two heads, actually, because the two images on the left are part of one piece that's in the Metropolitan Museum right there. And the wooden core looks like almost a modern sculpture, but it actually was a wooden core that was created to never be seen. It's protecting the skull of Saint Iria. And the skull of Saint Iria inside, and then the hammered silver and gold, the gold beard I like very much, all of that on the outside. That is a very specific kind of relic, these head relics that we thought we wanted to just quickly share with you before we separate for today. Look at the jeweled collar. Look at the hammering. Yes.
Yes, no, they became very popular from around the 9th century. This idea of parading the head of the saint during public holidays, during festivities, religious festivities, and the actual divine, the divinity, it's human, yes, because it's a humanoid head, but the materials that are used and the fact that it's a physical manifestation of the person's head and as well as their skull inside. But what's interesting to us today for jewels is the beautiful materials.
Look at the piercing for the 5 o'clock shadow. I just noticed that.
Exactly.
You see it on the gold?
It looks like it's repoussé from behind, doesn't it? And those beautiful gems in his necklace, the filigree work, the enamel work, it's all of this high level of craftsmanship of that time.
So if you have any doubt about men wearing jewelry in the Middle Ages, if you're going to do a saint and show him with all this jewelry, they clearly did.
Yes, this is Saint Eustace, and he was actually a Roman. He was a soldier for Trajan, the Roman emperor, and he had a vision of a cross lighting up in between the antlers of a deer, and he became Christian, and the rest is quite
It didn't
bad.
end well, so
Didn't,
we say.
For all of, well, Saint Thierry didn't actually, he was never tortured or died, but this poor man, yes. But to show the realism of his hair and the beautiful filigree work, and that men, yes, did indeed wear lots of jewelry.
They're just stunning. And we just want to, again, as we talk about the naturalism and the sacred, we talk about where can we find jewels. If we want to really find out the truth of how many people did have jewelry, even if it wasn't precious in terms of gold and pearls, we need the pilgrim's badges. What are pilgrim's badges? If you've read Canterbury Tale, you know that thieves put pilgrim's badges on to look like pilgrims. If you were a pilgrim, you acquired badges. It's like the way tourists take selfies in front of statues and paintings. You had to, but these badges had religious and even profane powers to become pregnant, powers to cure from being blind. What we're looking at on the left is again the same book of hours about the miracles accomplished by St. Louis. And this is St. Louis just before he's about, it's like a cartoon. The father and son are coming into the palace. They've been allowed into the palace because the son is blind. And if you look carefully, you see the badges on their hats, all different kinds of badges. As they would collect them, they would put them on their hats. You see what's called the aumônier, which is the purse where they would carry everything for their expenses. You see the stick for walking. And if we scroll over, you see, like a cartoon, the next scene is here. There's St. Louis, and he is curing the little boy who still has the same purse around his neck of blindness. He can see, his eyes are open, and he's looking. Behind him are more relics. So from the very most humble jewel that everyone could have on the left, and the most humble people, because if you look just for detail, look at their feet. So they're coming into the palace of St. Louis with bare feet and humble sandals and shoes, and then they've got the precious relics right there, and the little boy is being cured of blindness. That kind of tells the whole story, too, about that bridge being crossed from the earth to the heavenly, and about from the humble to the most sophisticated, the whole story being told by jewels. What were these pilgrims' badges? What was the language of images, iconography of these pilgrims' badges? Here you have a lamb in base metal, lead. You have, on the left, a lamb of the most precious. A lamb that's gold and a priceless Baroque pearl that looks like the Lamb of God. That's Renaissance beginning, because it says 16th century. The one in the middle is solid Middle Ages, possibly even the 1300s, from the Museum of London. Language of images, almost the same, from the very humble to the most precious, the most rich. That's the story of pilgrims' badges. Now, you may know someone who has a St. Christopher's medal.
The Saint Christopher is one of the most popular saints in stories in Christianity. And he was actually, his job was to help people cross a treacherous river. And Saint Christopher one day is carrying a child on his shoulder. And halfway through the journey, he says, "You are so heavy, I don't know if I'm going to make it." And the young child says to him, "This is because I am Jesus, you are carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." So he forevermore became known as the saint of travels, safe travels. He could save you from instant death. In those days, of course, dying without being blessed was a fate worse than anything. And we see this beautiful diptych from Switzerland, and you see the gentleman who ordered the painting on the right. He's praying to St. Christopher. He's the donor. You have the swans, and above him is this mermaid, this very sensual mermaid. There's nothing quite religious about her. She's wearing a crown, and we thought it was interesting to show you the actual, we have a gentleman on the right who's lighting the way. It was part of a larger polyptyptic, of course, devotional. And we have this mermaid. We have the St. Christopher, of course, with the religious significance, and on the right, the mermaid. And the mermaid is probably, people would throw these into rivers. This is why we know where we find them. After their wish was granted, after their pilgrimage, they would throw it into the river. They're found in the Thames, they're found in the Seine. And this one is actually much more elaborate in the sense that she's almost like a brooch.
Yes.
And she's holding attributes of Venus, and she's a beautiful woman. So it's probably an earthly desire that inspired this one.
And we love, in the language of images again, left and right, flanking this very precious and expensive altarpiece for a very rich man who wanted to go to heaven. He's like buying a stairway to heaven, like the song. We have these very humble jewels, exquisite definition, because they were literally printed. They were printed like books. In fact, the people who made them transferred their skills to books just a few years later, and they published books.
This is actually one of our, well, it's a beautiful piece. And
it's a favorite.
In the Middle Ages, brooches, exchanging of brooches was very important, and it actually sometimes could even signify an engagement if the lady accepted it. We can see this in some of those illuminated manuscripts. This one is in the shape of an E, so obviously this gentleman, who by the way has one arrow on the right hand, the other arrow on the left, remember Cupid and the arrow? He's obviously very in love with someone whose name starts with E, to the heart. And there's actually a bead of emerald, and it's a beautifully crafted piece. And it actually, what's interesting about it too, it opens, so it's really an early locket. You could actually put perhaps a lock of her hair. So we're really in a sentimental jewel, and the actual, the inscription is, "Oh, fair lady, I'll always remain close to your heart."
May I?
May I remain close to your heart. So yes, fair lady, may I always remain close to your heart. So this sentimental jewel, which is, it had a function as a brooch to hold clothing, but it also had a very symbolic function. And we love this tapestry from the Louvre. From Aha, and he's this very courtly dressed, well-dressed gentleman in this courtly scene where he's offering literally his heart to the lady.
There it is. So Valentine's Day hearts didn't begin with chocolate in the 20th century. He's offering his heart, and it looks just like a red Valentine's Day heart. And there she is, as you say, rabbits are fertility, the dog is loyalty. This shows that she's sophisticated and elegant, because ladies love to hunt with falcons. No, she's got her, see that? She's got the falcon's glove.
Yeah.
She's a falconer.
Yeah, definitely.
Bracelet could be made today. It could be a Jean de Pré Art Deco bracelet. She has her pearls. She must have her pearls. That is ermine. This is us telling you all the story of love. It's telling you an incredible sentimental message, as do these two rings. Family, love. The ring on the left, a big, gorgeous, limpid cabochon sapphire with two messages: boucler la boucle, buckling the buckle. Love conquers all, and Ave Maria, Heavenly Mother. And on the right, so that's a love ring, that's a ring of marriage, but it's also saying, let's also be respectful and careful about heaven. On the right, a Jewish wedding ring. Middle Ages, the 1300s, the time of the Black Death. They are so rare, they're gone. This one, we're very lucky because it was in the Eye of the Connoisseur exhibition here in New York when L'École was on its nomadic here in New York. Thanks to the generous, private, very private owner, we have these high-def pictures. It really looks like a house or a temple, right, Paul?
Yes, these Jewish wedding rings, we interpret that as, it's actually the household of the new couple, but it also it represents the Temple of Jerusalem, which was destroyed. So it has this double meaning, religious and profoundly, let's say, connecting image.
And yet there are literally a maximum of 3 or 4 still in the world. There is a type of ring that's one stone carved. You look at that. The first time I showed that to our gemologists at L'École, I found the picture in the database of Kunsthistorische Museum in Vienna. They looked at it and they said, that's got to be a mistake. That's glass. It's impossible. I called the Kunsthistorische Museum and they said, no, we've tested it. It's sapphire. It's from the 1400s. We have it here, and it's sapphire. Time went by, and we were preparing our new course on jewelry design history. I became obsessed. I had always been involved, but I became even more obsessively involved in a book called Anne of Bavaria's Jewel Book. You can access it on the database of the Library of Congress, for example. It's kept in the National Library of Munich ever since the 1500s, and it was a gift of a loving husband to his loving wife. The Duke of Bavaria gave it to Anne of Bavaria, and yes, she is a descendant of Charles the Bold and his daughter, Mary of Burgundy, who married into the Habsburgs, and she would be the great adoptive granddaughter of our Margaret of York. Why is this jewel, and I'm quite sure it's the same jewel, shown surrounded by jeweled framework. And why did it have its portrait painted among with 110, 111 other jewels in this precious book? Because the jewels were so important to them. They were on a little island of Catholicism in the middle of a sea of Protestantism. And they wanted to show the jewels, this is page 45, it even shows, they wanted to show the jewels as being important and precious. They wanted to memorialize them. Most of the other jewels, all the other jewels, in fact, are gone. But this one somehow got through. That sort of brings us right to the end. This is our last page of our last chapter before our final image. And this is truly buckling the buckle. The belt on the right is fashion. It's also love.
Yes, it's an Italian, we call that a girdle. It was often a sign of betrothal in the Middle Ages, and it's very rare to have the brocade silk that still exists. It's a base metal, but which is actually, as you can see, gilt and enameled. And it has a few messages on there. There's messages in Italian and Latin about love. Love conquers all, I want love. And we know the girdle was quite symbolic in the sense that only the gentleman who was going to marry the young lady had the right to open it. And so this girdle became it was kind of a sentimental gift in many ways. And it is buckling the buckle, as you say, quite literally, because it's a buckle.
And in the middle, we have a crown, a reliquary crown. So here are little bits and pieces of saints, but fabulous singing angels, eternally childlike angels with all kinds of different wing positions, singing, and you can see their positions always different. Like the angels in the very beginning, boucler le boucle, buckling the buckle of the Jan van Eyck Ghent altarpiece. They are perfect goldsmithery. They're very evolved and sophisticated. We have intaglios from ancient times, we have sapphires, we have exquisite balancing and symmetry of design, and you can visit this piece, as we do, in the medieval section of the Louvre.
It was actually a gift from our St. Louis in Liège, to the Dominicans of Liège. And on the left, we have this cluster brooch. We like to call it a cluster brooch.
In the Met, right there.
And it's actually quite, it drives the point home that it's a love jewel. On the top is the diamond. Remember, Adamas, the diamond is invincible. And this is just the point of a natural diamond. And we have pearls, the purity of the pearls, the emerald, which is closed set emerald. An emerald can mean many things. It could be healing. It can be curative. And in this case, it's a love message. And in case we weren't clear, it was a love message. It's written at the bottom, Amor. A-M-O-R. And the texture of this piece is astounding, the depth of it, the 3D nature of the gold craftsmanship. And we were thinking about it the other day, and it kind of reminded us of a jewel by Schlumberger, didn't it?
Which
that
is
crazy sort of naturalism.
Which is showing you, coming all the way back in time to all the way forward, we weren't all that different. And a lot that happened. The Middle Ages should really be seen, it's not the Berlin Wall that tumbled at one particular moment in time, and even that had been building up for a long time. There wasn't an end of the Middle Ages with a great jubilant announcing after 1492, the Renaissance has arrived. To buckle the buckle and to make our point, because again, art historians have to be the successful lawyers of mysteries involving history. Let's look at this fellow. Look at him. And then let's zoom out and look at him with his fur, with his fashionable headdress, with his eyes, with his fur, his hand holding this red ring. He's a jeweler. He's a goldsmith. His name is Jan de Leeuw. He was painted in 1436 by his friend Jan van Eyck. And he could be on the cover of a rock album, of a rock music. He could be a rock musician. Yeah, absolutely. And he's looking at you with that little confident smile, with those clear green eyes, and he's saying, I'm not a prince, I'm not a duke, I'm not even a wealthy merchant. I'm a jeweler, I'm a goldsmith, I work with my hands. He could be Maxime or Frederick in the high jewelry atelier. But guess what? I'm a human who counts, to the point that I can be painted by the most famous painter in Europe, like in the position of a prince or a king, staring at you directly in this new modern way, because I'm a human and I'm a modern man. We're done, thank you very much, but we're not done, because next month, March 16th and 17th, our dear friends Marie-Laure Cassius-Dorantin and Leonard Puy are going to explore the pleasures and beauties of fancy colored diamonds. Every month we have our conversations. Take our QR codes. We even have a WeChat now, and stay in touch with us on Instagram or through Facebook or directly coming to L'École and taking a course with us. Our dear friend Ghislain has collected some questions for us.
Thank you, Ghislain.
Paul, do you want to take it?
Do you think in the Van Eyck panel, the crown of Jesus looks very like the Turkish crown used by Suleiman, etc.?
Well, there are
Actually,
parallels.
Yes, it's very Byzantine, and which was influenced obviously by the Far East.
Because the Turkish crown used by Suleiman is influenced by Constantinople. Rome, remember, moved, it split in half, and the Constantinople Byzantium really was the origin for most of the styles about jewelry, absolutely.
Where is the quotation about the pearl from? I believe that was from the bestiaries.
Yes, it's from the bestiary.
The English one, the
We
Cassia?
actually were showing you the message in Latin when Paul was reading it. When we looked at the detail, that actually was Paul reading the message, and that particular bestiary.
It was the English one on the right. Or
Yes,
the French,
and it's
the Cassian at the Bodleian Library.
John Cassian, there, Paul didn't even need it. John Cassian at the Bodleian Library, and it was of Oxford, and it was the early 1200s.
When did jewelers start to cut the precious gemstones? Ooh, that's the
Have I
million-dollar
heard about the
question.
medieval palm pearl? Yes, I own it, and I gave it to Olivier Segura, our scientific director. That poem obsesses me. We won't start because we'll never leave. It's fantastic. It's by the same man who wrote The Green Knight, and we don't know who he was.
Oh yeah, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It's anonymous.
Have the tools, that, you know that yes and no, the tools of jewelers have evolved a lot through time. Yes, some of them are really the same, and some of them, of course, they use lasers and they use modern things. Is there a third head inside of the wooden one? No, inside that's very good. There's a grill, very exquisite
it's a good
metallic
question,
grill. And if
actually.
you go on the Met Museum, search the collections, and you search Saint-Thierry, you can see everything. Many photos.
It had portions of his skull, not the entire skull.
Yes, the figureheads are a notion from the mermaid piece. Figureheads on ships. The mermaid was protecting the ship. The mermaid is protection. She would bring you your wishes.
This one is, when did the punch mark on gold and silver jewels
Middle
appear?
Ages.
In France, it was in the 13th century, definitely.
Some of these pieces have so many pearls.
God, that's for you.
Were natural pearls more plentiful then? I know
Yes.
how rare it is. Yes and absolutely no. The pearl can only be produced by the mollusk. It can only give us the pearl when nature is perfect. Perfect. No pollution, not even consumption in the area. Northern Europe had pearls. Caesar, believe it or not, wanted to conquer Britain to get pearls. So they were extremely rare and extremely valuable, but you could find them more. But to find the quality of pearls we saw was unbelievably rare. How big was the sapphire used in the ring? Well, it's a ring size. You know, it's like a 53 size ring.
Yeah.
So how big was it before they cut it? Gee, I'd like to know. It's almost miraculous to look at it. It's a one-stone ring. There was a one-stone emerald ring in the Altani collection that was sold in the Mughal Magnificence,
Yes,
what is it? The Christie sale,
Yes, the Christie
Maharajas.
sale of the Altani collection.
Thank you so much for your questions. Keep talking to us on Instagram and Facebook because we answer, along with our colleagues, we answer your questions, and we really enjoyed seeing you today. Not seeing you, but seeing you virtually and bringing you here to look out on Central Park and to invite you to explore places like the Met Museum, both virtually and on your own feet, because now we can.
Thank you, everybody, and
Thank you.
goodbye from New York, from this beautiful Albertine, this mansion, vestige of the Gilded Age. We bid you goodbye, but we'll see you soon.